Welcome to the Global Nashville program. I'm Patrick Ryan, President of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. This evening, we have something special for you. Before we start, let me thank our program partners, the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce International Business Council, the Center for International Business at beautiful Belmont University, and today, program sponsor, the Japan America Society of Tennessee. Our regular host of Global Nashville, former Mayor Carl Dean, is away, so we've asked Matt Kisber to guest host the program. Matt is chairman of Silicon Ranch, a pioneer in solar energy projects in the Southeast, and he is a former commissioner of economic and community development for the state of Tennessee. Matt has invited as his guest today his former boss at ECD, Governor Phil Bredesen. You can find bios for both of these gentlemen in our program details. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Pat.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the topic of Japanese business investment in the state of Tennessee. Governor Bredesen and Commissioner Kisber led the state's efforts during 2003 to 2011. They recognized the importance of building relationships around the world that would bring businesses and jobs to Tennessee. In particular, they cultivated the commercial relationship with Japan and were key to the expansion of commercial ties. To give you some perspective on the importance of the Japanese commercial relationship to Tennessee, let's talk about a few numbers. Foreign direct investment in Tennessee is about $40 billion in capital investment, creating jobs for about 150,000 Tennesseans. Of that, 20 billion, about half of the total foreign capital investment, is from Japanese businesses, accounting for over 50,000 employees. Those 50,000 Tennesseans working for Japanese businesses in the state are more than the employment brought in by businesses from the next four nations combined: Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and Canada. Let me now turn you over to our guest host for Global Nashville, Matt Kisber, for this important conversation. Matt?
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's great to be with both you and Governor Bredesen this evening. It's a real treat for me to have this conversation with Governor Bredesen and to reminisce and reflect on some of the work that we did during our time in office. I've had the opportunity to reflect as we prepared for this session. And Governor, I can think back to December of 2002 after the election, during your transition, when we discussed my potentially being your Commissioner of Economic and Community Development.
Right.
You reminded me at that time that you had made more promises in the area of economic development than any other area of state government. I've never forgot that. And so I'm interested because while it's clear we both understand that the private sector creates jobs, in your experience, what is the role of government, especially in this instance, state government, in supporting job creation and job retention, especially with the recruitment of foreign capital, such as the 50-year track record Tennessee's had of success in recruiting Japanese investment?
I think there are several things. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's the private sector that creates the investment. But I think there's several things you have to do with the state to be successful. One of them has worked so well for Tennessee is just to create the kind of environment that these businesses find it easy to operate in. I mean, after all, they are, first of all, in business to be in business and to build things and create things. And so a lot of the things that you can do, I think, are just to create that environment. A lot of times, people think about these recruitment jobs, recruitment of capital and jobs in terms of, what are the tax breaks you're given or something like that. I mean, I always found, and I think both of us did in our experience, that there was a lot more to it than that. And the really important things had to do with the general business climate and environment. And Tennessee obviously is a state with low taxes. It's got a low cost of living, so it's a pleasant place to send people to. Labor relations in the state have always been good. We are of course a right to work state, but I think it's really a lot broader than that. There are good relationships between between labor and business in the state. And that's really persisted through a lot of administrations of both parties, and that's very helpful. And the second thing I think is really important is that state government by its nature, it's a big bureaucracy. And having dealt previous to that in the business world with trying to do some things in other states, it can be very hard to get answers. I mean, when you're in business, you need to do things. You need to make decisions. You need to get answers about things and move forward. And I think some of the most successful things that we did together were to just speed up the whole process and make sure that it really worked well to get answers to questions. People got questions about how is this law going to be interpreted? How is taxation going to work on these kinds of subtleties? And I think that's important. And the last one that I wouldn't underestimate is just personal diplomacy. I mean, these companies, I mean, they want the governor, the governor's officials, and they want to see him and meet him and understand them. And I think that can be a very important piece of it as well. I mean, you and I put a lot of miles on it over the years, just trying to make sure that the people we were talking to knew who we were and knew us as individuals rather than just positions in the state. So I think actually, there's a lot of things that states can do, and along with that, things the local governments can do to really, create the climate to get the answers people need to have that personal relationship as well. I think the states and state government are really important in this process.
As you think back to Japanese investment in Tennessee, it's most people equate it to Nissan coming to Tennessee in the 1980s, but really some of the first Japanese investment was in the 1970s when Toshiba came to Middle Tennessee making televisions and microwave ovens.
Right.
I mean, much has changed in both the world and in Tennessee since that time. But what we have seen is the automotive sector, as well as electronics companies like Sharp come to Memphis, and of course, Nissan and the automotive companies, but a number of Japanese companies located across the state in a range of different product sectors. What do you think makes Tennessee a desirable location for Japanese companies, not just automotive, but all the Japanese companies that are here?
I think there are several things. I mean, first of all, they're going to be sending some of their people here. Tennessee is just a good place to live. I mean, it's the people are wonderful. The environment is great. People come here and move to Tennessee. Sometimes it's hard to get them out of there when it's time for them to go to go back home. I think we've had a stable business environment. I think that part of it is important. We've had both Democratic and Republican governors over this period of time. They've largely been all quite business oriented and willing to honor previous administration's commitments. So, they're not, companies look at it and they see they're not at risk of, the Republican was governor, and so now the Democrat comes in and everything's going to change. And then when the Republican comes in, everything changes. There's been that commitment to honoring previous commitments and so on. I know when I've talked with people who from these from companies that are located here, and particularly some of the Japanese companies, I mean, they're impressed with the fact that there've been a lot of times, as you well know, that you and I would meet with them with members of previous administrations. I mean, we did a lot of work with Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander when they were in the Senate, and they just like the notion of, here's two people from two different parties, and they're obviously not only in the same room, they get along and they're friends with each other, and that gives them a lot of a lot of confidence. But I think that that stability and willingness to honor commitments, going along with just that it's a great place to live, really is kind of at the heart of it. It's just made it a very attractive place for foreign companies, especially for Japanese companies, to put their capital and send their people and do business.
just to that point, I recall when we came into office, the Sunquist administration was working with Toyota Bodine on a project that we got to announce. We closed the deal and got to announce it in Jackson, Tennessee in late January. But that was a great example. And that was one of the comments they made, that the transition was seamless and that you never would have known you had gone from a Republican administration to a Democratic administration at that time. And that decision was actually followed, by Nissan's decision later in 2003 to invest in Smyrna and the production of the Nissan Pathfinder. And over the 8 years of our administration, Nissan continued to invest in expanding with more production in Smyrna, as well as the engine plant in Deckard.
Right.
We also, worked closely with Brother Industries in Memphis, making printers and other office equipment. Denso in Maryville, Bridgestone and Morrison, lots of expansions. But one that stands out, and I know you remember this well because I know it's a highlight of our administration, was the work on recruiting the Nissan headquarters from California to Franklin in 2005. Can you talk a little bit about both that project, but also what you think the impact of that announcement was on the region and on future economic development? It was one of the first large corporate headquarters that moved to Tennessee from other parts of the country.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the decision, and I'm both very familiar with all the ups and downs and the ins and outs of that process. But I think the decision really just kind of underlines the things we've just been talking about. They were looking for a stable environment. They were looking, in that case, of moving a lot of people from California to Tennessee. So they were very interested and impressed with the quality of life. And I remember several things that I was personally involved with was going to events at somebody's home somewhere where you had potential relocatees, if that's the word, from California, and just talking to them about the lifestyle and what it was like to live here. And I always thought at least I had a leg up in that conversation because I'm one of those people. I mean, I was not born in Tennessee and came here, and I can't honestly say when I originally arrived here that I thought I would spend the rest of my life here, but rapidly found it just a great place to live, and raise a family, which is what we ended up doing here. And I think that headquarters really, though, it was kind of a milestone that it just sort of underlined that things are happening here in Tennessee. That excuse me, I'm sorry. That people are looking at it and making these decisions. I compare it in some way to when I was mayor and the Titans came to Tennessee and to Nashville. I mean, I don't think anybody ever moved to Nashville specifically because the Titans were there, but it's one of those things that just adds facets, it adds to the amenities that you have and the quality of life. And ultimately, those things are really important. It helps to focus citizens that things are happening and focus them on the opportunity and generates confidence. And I think of all the relocations we did and stuff that, probably that and maybe the Volkswagen one alongside of it, those two were the two that really most had that to the largest degree. People just looked around and said, wow, look what's happening here. Maybe we need to take a look.
Well, one of the other significant decisions that occurred during our administration that involved Tennessee and Japan relations was the decision by the Japanese government to relocate the Consulate General of Japan from New Orleans, where it had been for decades, to Nashville. What's the significance of the Japanese government making that decision? And in your opinion, what has that done to further the relationship between Tennessee and Japan?
I actually think it was kind of in the same category of what we've just been talking about with the Nissan relocation of the headquarters, in that it really is it's a vote of confidence in the state. I mean that the Japanese government was confident enough that they were going to be successful. They were going to continue to grow their presence in the state, that it made sense to move the consulate here. It certainly gave us a chance to broaden our relationships with senior Japanese officials. We got to know many more of them than we would have under other circumstances. And also, I think for the Japanese expatriates who came here in many cases with some of these investments to live here, it gave them some support and confidence as well. So I think it was one of those kind of important milestones when you look back on it, that just helps to keep putting the foundation down to continue to grow the relationship.
We've talked a lot about the Tennessee-Japanese relationship, but we also in Tennessee have had great success at recruiting investment from around the world. And during our administration, one of the areas we focused on, in addition to Japan, was establishing relationships in China, as well as furthering our presence in Europe and Canada. We had success at bringing in investment from those areas, as well as Brazil, to name a few. As governor, I remember we had lots of discussions about how to establish these relationships and how to build on them, make sure they weren't transactional, but that they, at its core, had something that was meaningful to establish the relationship and to build on it. Why did you feel it was important to make these investments in Tennessee representation around the globe?
Well, I think that kind of stuff is really important. In fact, I'm a little disappointed that we've withdrawn somewhat from that over the past years. This kind of relationship building, it's a long game. It's not transactional, as you said. That you need to have a presence. You need to get information about what is going on. One of the things that I found, back in very early in my career, when I was in my 30s, I spent a couple of years in the UK doing business there. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that for a lot of foreign CEOs and people, the personal relationship thing ranks higher in their universe than maybe it does for a lot of American businesses. I think a lot of American businesses can be very transactional about these kinds of things, but especially with the Japanese. They wanted those relationships. They wanted to know the people. It's not just about tax breaks or those other kinds of things. They want those kind of relationships. And one of the things that I thought was really important in that regard was that it was also became clear to me that the status of government officials in Japan, for example, is much higher than it is in this country. I think a lot of times businesses here think that those of us in government is kind of a necessary evil, but in Japan, those officials are among the most honored people. And so I think anything you can do by showing as one of those officials your interest in the country by placing people there and traveling there yourselves and your people as you and I did, it's more important, I think, in some of these foreign relationships, and I think especially with the Japanese and the Chinese relationships, that that you have that kind of a relationship. But the bottom line is what I said at the outset. This stuff is the long game. The stuff that Lamar Alexander did getting the Nissan plant here way back when. That's a meaningful piece of the puzzle and the foundation that you and I had a chance to build on. And hopefully some of the things that we did in the aughts will bear fruit in the 20s and 30s in that regard. So I think those relationships are really important and keeping, and they're not expensive. I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard to do. Um, but this is, this is a long game, and those things are important.
Well, following up on the long game, I think, as we reflect on both the Japanese investment in Tennessee as well as the automotive industry in our state, as you said, it began with Governor Alexander in 1980, and it's hard to believe that Nissan's decision to locate then was the first transplant automotive facility in the U.S., and how that automotive industry and the supply chain that supports it has grown across the state as well as the country. In addition to Nissan, I know we did work with Toyota, and they have a lot of investments in the state, their largest being Denso's activities in Maryville and Athens. And it's a little difficult to think back to 2006 and 2007 when Toyota was seriously considering Chattanooga's Enterprise South, and we were the bridesmaid instead of the bride for that manufacturing plant that ultimately went to Blue Springs, Mississippi. But that prepared us for 2008 when Volkswagen came looking for a place to plant their flag, and they chose Enterprise South. In your opinion, will Volkswagen grow across Tennessee in the same way over the next 40 years that Nissan and the supply chain has grown across the state and has become so important to our economic vitality?
Yeah, well, as you know, man, I mean, we were both disappointed with when that Toyota thing happened, but we also learned from it what was attractive and what wasn't attractive about the site and how they made their decisions. In my business background it's always been kind of entrepreneurial, and when you do that, you just recognize that you have to play percentages a little bit, not because you don't win every one, and you have to be patient and wait. We recruited sports teams here, and I failed miserably a couple times before we got the Predators here, and then ultimately the Titans off the back of that. So I think that I think we learned a lot in that process. I think there's no question but that the infrastructure that had been established in the state of auto suppliers, for example, really helped in that. I think the farsightedness of the local government in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, and not giving up on that site, not breaking it up into a million little sites, but saying we're going to someday get a big thing there, has also been they were playing the long game, just as we've talked about, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. I think the fact that you already had some investments that were great success stories really helped give confidence to Volkswagen as well. So I think a combination of all the good things about Tennessee anyway we've described in terms of the quality of life and the stability of its government and so on was there, but did not hurt a bit to just have them look around and see that other companies had made major commitments to the state, and they turned out very, very well. I think that really helped.
I had the opportunity actually in 1987 to make my first trip to Japan. It was part of the American Council of Young Political Leaders, and spent 2 weeks learning about Japan from the political and economic perspective. And I remember very vividly being in a Dunkin' Donuts at 8 a.m. and hearing Elvis Presley playing over the public address system. And one of the things I recall from our experience, and I'd be interested to get your observations, is that while we had a lot of business interactions and developed a lot of friendships, one of the ties that really helped connect Tennessee and our friends in Japan was the love of country music, the Dolly Parton, the respect we both have for Jack Daniels. How important are those cultural aspects to the relationship, in your opinion?
Well, I think they're I think the cultural aspects are important as well. I mean, I discovered that, once you get out into sort of people who are a long way from Tennessee in the United States and, don't travel here or live here, Tennessee is, you and I have talked about it. I mean, what they know about Tennessee is Elvis Presley, Jack Daniels, and Dolly Parton. And that's Tennessee to them. And the fact that we could talk about those things and so on was very was very helpful. But I mean, I loved, as I know you did, we did so much of it together. I mean, I loved going to Japan and starting to have some understanding of a very different culture and often a very different way of thinking about things. It's not all one-sided. I mean, I'm proud of what we accomplished, but I had an awful good time doing it.
Yes, I think we both can agree on that. Well, Tennessee's had a lot of success. We're the second largest state for foreign direct investment from Japan, second only to California, and have been in that position for decades. And as such, it's customary for the first international trip for a new Tennessee governor or new economic development commissioner is to Japan. You participated several times in the Southeast U.S. Japan meetings, which I think are very important for continuing that relationship, as well as visiting Japan several times as governor. Any highlights or memories that come to mind that you'd like to share from those trips?
Well, if I can take it out of the business world and just the personal thing, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things I remember. It was my first earthquake. I remember we were in Tokyo, and I was up on some high floor in the hotel, and all of a sudden everything started waving around, and chandeliers and the stuff in the ceiling swinging back and forth, and things sliding off the desk, and if you remember, we tuned in on the television, and practically as we were enduring the earthquake, CNN was reporting an earthquake in Japan. So that was my first earthquake, and so on. I really remember going and seeing the Bridgestone art collection. I mean, when they asked me to go visit it, I was not quite sure what to expect. But as you know, I've a hobby of mine has been painting, and the Bridgestone art collection, a painter I've always really liked and studied and liked to look at his stuff is Cezanne. And I walked into the museum, and there were, Cezannes that I recognized the moment I walked in that were sitting there. There's a Mont Saint Victoire one, which is a very famous painting of his, and you walk in a room and there it is at this Bridgestone Museum. And so I really liked that as well. Another thing that I remember very well is I've always admired Howard Baker. I really thought very highly of him. And he was ambassador to Japan when we started, and if you remember, hosted a big event at the ambassador's residence to meet Japanese business people. But it was also a chance for me to just sit down privately and just talk with him a little bit. We agreed we both had political careers, but kind of passed by each other in the night in some ways, both in terms of timing and other kinds of things. And I'm sorry I had to go umpteen thousand miles from Tennessee to have it, but a chance just to get to know this man that I admired so much a little bit personally was really, really important to me. And I love Japanese gardens. I try to visit them when I'm in other cities, like Portland, Oregon's got a great one. And we went and visited some wonderful ones in both Tokyo and Osaka, I believe. So there were a lot of those kind of personal things that I really enjoyed about the process as well. I don't want anybody to think I didn't work hard doing recruiting and all that, but it was nice to see some of these things, and there was some very pleasant surprises in that way. I can do without the earthquakes, but the rest of it was great.
No, there's no question that the experience was quite meaningful, and what we accomplished for the state endures, but the personal relationships and the friendships meant quite a bit, I know, to both of us. And we could we could stay here and reminisce for hours on our activities, both in Japan and around the world during the time in office. But I know Pat got some Q&A. So Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you for giving me the time to have this conversation with Governor Bredesen.
Thank you, Mr. Kisber, and thank you, Governor. We appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation tonight. And we do have a few questions in the queue, but let me first remind everyone, especially those listening on our podcast, that we're talking with Governor Phil Bredesen and former Commissioner of Tennessee Economic Community Development, Matt Kisber, about the impact in Tennessee of Japanese investment in the state. And we want to start out with one question that came in from our Facebook Live. Governor, we saw the facts and figures of the impact on Tennessee. Can you comment on what Tennesseans should know about the importance of Japanese investment and why they don't know more about what's going on in that realm?
Yeah, it's I think, I mean, I found people are familiar with it. I mean, you know, no one, or if you're in positions like Matt and I were, you're involved with it day to day. But I found as I got out into some of these smaller communities and more rural communities where there was a significant Japanese investment presence, people knew about it and appreciated it. You know, back when I was in my 30s, I think as I mentioned, I spent a couple of years abroad, and I've learned a lot of stuff and discovered a lot of things. But you know, grow up, particularly if you're out in the middle of the country, you don't think instantly about international trade and international investment, you know, quite as easily. I got to the UK, and you know, doing business with, you know, Germany or France or something was like us doing business with Kentucky or Illinois. I mean, it's a very natural kind of thing. And I think Tennesseans are getting, I know they are, have been over the years, just more and more comfortable that this is a normal part of the economic process. The world is getting smaller, and the economy is more complex. And I do think people are beginning to realize that and understand the kind of opportunities that arise out of cultivating those relationships.
We have a question from David Rands. He asks, how can we better build connections between Tennessee's institutions of higher education and Japanese industry? Presuming they aren't already in places like UTK and others.
Yeah. I think, you know, I found the higher education establishment pretty willing to open those doors. There are a lot of things that we can do in the way of training. The community colleges in particular have got facilities and people who can help with that process, and I believe can. I worked hard during the time I was governor to broaden the relationships between the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which is our big research university, and Oak Ridge, which has a lot of people from different countries working at and around it in the non-secret, the non-weapons, you know, kind of stuff there. And I do hope that we'll continue to do that. I also think that you know, simply being a place where students from other countries, Japan and any foreign country, can come and study is really important. I mean, I think they come to have an understanding and an appreciation of American culture. That's something we have to work on. I mean, over the past you know, half a decade or more, we've really cut down on that, and I think are losing our status as, you know, the place to go for higher education in the world. I hope that we can get over that and start opening things up to get the right kinds of visas for people. And I'd love for anybody who for a foreign country who wants to and can get support for doing it, to be able to come and spend some time here. They can contribute enormously to both the diversity and the intellectual vigor of our institutions. I think it's a very, very healthy thing.
We have a question from one of our participants here on Zoom. You've successfully started a healthcare company and a renewable clean energy company. You seem to have a knack for picking up and coming industries. What's the next thing that should be on our radar? And this comes from an anonymous attendee who's obviously looking for stock picks.
I don't know what the next one is. I've always thought that where entrepreneurial opportunities exist is where there's a lot of change taking place in the world. I mean, healthcare for me, has changed. Healthcare has changed dramatically in the last half century. Really starting with Medicare and Medicaid in the mid 1960s, it's just changed it dramatically. And that's why I think there's opportunity. Big companies have a lot of things going for them, but they're not often fleet of foot, and they have things to protect and so on. And it kind of falls, I think, to entrepreneurs to kind of step in. So that was the genesis of the healthcare stuff. And the same thing happened, with the solar company that both. I mean, Matt is chairman of it. We got involved in trying to recruit some solar oriented businesses to Tennessee. And to be honest with you, at the time, I really thought it was kind of a boutique area, that, the solar was still fairly expensive, but some people who had some money wanted them on their roof or something like that. But as we got into it, I just saw, and I think Matt saw the same thing, and say, there's something really fundamental going on here. There's some big changes happening in the way that energy is going to be produced and delivered in this, in this nation, and that presents some opportunities. So, we kind of picked a way we thought would be one way to be a player in that field. So I guess I say that, but I don't have the next area picked out. But the trick in my mind is to look for things that are changing and evolving rapidly, and that's where the opportunity is great, especially for smaller companies that can move quickly and be innovative. And that's what I spent my non-political life doing. And there's a lot of opportunity out there today.
So the answer is, this is not CNBC, and this is not the Jim Cramer show. So we have another energy question. Tennessee is becoming a leader in electric vehicles and battery storage, in large part due to the investment of time and energy put in, no pun there, put in by you and your predecessors in state government. What are your thoughts on the aggressive goals set by the Biden administration for EVs? And parenthetically, we saw the climate report this week from the United Nations. The Secretary General said that there's a red alert, and that's hopefully will add some emphasis to putting those goals in place and meeting them.
Yeah, I have probably a little bit of a non-standard view about that. I mean, I think in the end, once you get away from the true believers, EVs are going to become more and more important, not because people are trying to fight climate change, but because they're just better cars. I mean, I own an EV, and it is a much nicer driving car than any other car I've ever had. I mean, they're really it's a great way to have a car. We obviously have got work to do on charging infrastructure, but that's something that is very very soluble. I wish people would stop fighting things that have been politicized, like climate change, and just focus on the fact that they're just better. You should do it because they're better cars. They're more fun to drive. They're less costly. They're virtually maintenance free, and do that. When we started with solar, recruiting business, Matt and I started with that. one of the things I liked about it was you could get support from across the political spectrum. I mean, what I would say to people is, I don't care if you believe in climate change or not. Okay, and I'm not arguing that issue with you. Some people do, and they're going to be addressing it, and we should have the jobs and the wealth that comes from meeting that need in the country. You don't have to agree with the basis of the need if the need is there. So in the same way I've always thought people take mass transportation where it's successful, it's not because people are trying to be good people and provide mass transportation. It's because it's a better way to get from here to there. If you're in Boston, Cambridge, and want to go down in downtown Boston, it's easier to go there on the subway than it is to drive a car. And I think the goals are aggressive. There's no question. There's no question about that. But I hope a lot of people will look at it from the standpoint of, is an electric car just a better car to have for my needs than something else, and not get so fascinated with whether or not it's the solution to global warming or not. I know that's not a standard view, especially for a Democrat, but I think people are, most people are very sort of down to earth and practical about these things, and they want things that work and are economical and attractive.
Well, we have a few minutes left, and we're out of questions in the queue. But let me ask you, getting back to Japanese investment. Most people think about the big places here in Middle Tennessee, but it's spread out across the state. There's a couple hundred Japanese firms, in addition to the other foreign direct investment around the state. As you look around during your time in office and the subsequent times, the spread across the state of Japanese investment, are there cases that you reflect on that made an impact on you when you looked at what happened in this or that community as a result of an investment coming in that might have changed some dynamics in that area?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that I really focused on the auto industry, which is largely a focus on Japanese investment. I mean, obviously Volkswagen is here now, but a lot of those supplier plants are there. Are that I was trying really hard as a governor to figure out how you support some of these smaller communities in more rural areas of the state. I mean, Nashville's doing fine, but we've got some rural communities state that are really struggling, and particularly some of these companies that have gone offshore in the last couple of decades. We recruited a lot of business from the Rust Belt because we work a little cheaper and wouldn't join a union here. And of course, those are the kind of companies that are the very first ones to go to Mexico or Indonesia or something else when the economic pressures get to be there. And I really saw it as an opportunity to support those communities. I mean, you can't put the Nissan truck factory or the Volkswagen plant in any place other than something that has got there's access to a large workforce. But if you've got a 100, 200 employee auto parts supplier, there's a lot of communities that can go in where you've got great workforce, you got people who really care about the jobs, got stability in the workforce. And so I really saw it as a way to do something to help those communities. I grew up in a rural community and kind of saw firsthand, what the kind of stuff which is happening as things start concentrating more and more in urban areas, and some of the smaller manufacturing businesses end up in, the products end up coming out of China and say in Indonesia and Mexico and other places.
Well, we've about run out of time here, but we have a minute or two for some closing thoughts. Chairman, Commissioner Kisber, do you have anything you'd like to add about the impact of Japanese business in the state before we close out tonight?
Well, just following up on what Governor Bredesen said, I mean, the way in which the investment is spread across the state and the attention it brings to the relationship in small communities in West, Middle, and in East Tennessee along with the growth of the celebrations and the festivals and the cultural aspect. I mean, I know Nashville and Memphis both have cherry blossom festivals and ways of celebrating this relationship. And you know, I understand there's some school programs in various parts of the state. I think that's a great way to encourage young people to get involved and to learn more about how this world is really a small place and we all need to live together in it. And organizations like the World Affairs Council, and I commend what you're doing and encourage young people to take advantage of that, because I think that as the governor pointed out, you know, we're longer in our careers than others, and there's a lot of opportunity and potential. And I think young people coming together and taking advantage of that is the opportunity that exists, and I'm excited by that. So I hope that we see that continue in Tennessee and grow.
Great. Governor Bredesen, thanks for being with us. Any last thoughts on the program tonight?
Yeah, just to say that I mean, one of the highlights for me of my time as governor was just, you know, learning more about Japanese business, the Japanese culture, having an opportunity to work on a lot of different kinds of projects for mutual benefit. And it's one of those things that I hope a lot of other people who are listening to this can have a similar kind of experience in the years ahead. And I love what you're doing with your organization. And I think these kinds of events like the Zoom event and the Facebook live streaming and so on is a great way to just introduce, you know, some people to, you know, some of the dimensions and some of the subtleties of these kinds of relationships. I hope there'll be somebody who comes out of this who just has a little more interest about how do we make this stuff work, these kind of connections work than they did before. If that's the case, I'd be very happy.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the kind words about the World Affairs Council. We'll keep plugging away at our global literacy work, and we hope that you'll be back. Commissioner Kisber was in the hot seat with Mayor Dean, and now he's driving the train tonight. So we thank him for coming back, and Governor, we look forward to you coming back and doing another program with us down the road. And thank you for being with us tonight. Again, this has been Global Nashville with Matt Kisber sitting in for Carl Dean. We'll be back in 4 weeks, and we look forward to bringing you more programs in that series. Also, look at our website, tnwac.org, for the rest of our program listings. We have a lot of interesting programs coming up. We're starting to put our fall calendar on the website. And again, Academic World Quest for high school students and teachers. Take a look at the website. We have a new season coming up, and we'll have all that information for you on the website. For those of you who are not members of the World Affairs Council, please visit the site and go to tnwac.org/join, and we encourage you to become members. That's how we help pay the light bill here. And if you're already a member, please consider making a gift. tnwac.org/donate. Thank you again, Governor Bredesen and Commissioner Kisber, and everyone have a great evening.